All right, we're going to pick up our work now and move on to section 18, which covers the topic of caching. And let's talk a little bit about what that actually means. That is a term that computer people throw around a little bit, and sometimes I actually wonder if people really understand the actual meaning of the word, especially when it comes to technology. Now, when web developers like us think about a cache, right, or caching content, we typically think of a browser cache, right? So we think of when we load a web page up on our screen, and I'm going to use an example here. It's like a silly little home page that I have for myself, right? And I'm using Google Chrome right now, and there's not really a lot of content on here. It's just a quick little series of links and an image, a couple images, one in the background, one in the foreground. And when I load this up, if I had not visited this page with this browser before, the browser would go out to the web server where this is held or saved, and it would read all the information into the client, the browser, and then put it up on the screen. That includes downloading the images and everything else on the page and then displaying it. When you visit a site often, and you know what, most sites don't change all the time. They really don't. There's certain aspects of them that stay pretty consistent. When you visit them, your browser will intelligently decide when to store the information and when to actually download it from the server. So one frustration that I often get, and I'll give you an example, it's like when I'm working with my Web 1 students, and I have a class going right now, we have this silly assignment that I do with all of them where we create a launch page, and then I have them link up to all the homework. This might look familiar to you guys now that you're about to graduate, and you're like, wow, I remember those days. And invariably, at some point in the semester, somebody working on this first semester web stuff will get to the point where it's like, I don't know what I'm doing wrong. I uploaded the right image, I'm sure I did. I put it on Apollo, I know I changed the code, and I load it up in my browser, and it's still my old page. You guys ever have that happen to you? Yeah, because the browser, if you load a page all the time, the browser will pull up what's on the hard drive first, especially if you just went to the page. Why on earth would it re-download the same images and content when you were just there 10 seconds ago? Right? Because most people aren't web designers. They're not changing the content on the server. So that creates a problem for us as surfers, because hitting that refresh button doesn't necessarily give you the latest version of the page. It might still be reading stuff from the browser cache, which is just a folder on your local hard drive that's already downloaded the content. So often what you have to do to get the new version of the page, you have to hold down Control and F5 to do a hard refresh. Or what I've been teaching my Web 1 students, and maybe you guys didn't know this, is if you're in inspect mode in your browser, and then you go to your refresh key and press and hold, not click, just press and hold, you can see the different reloads that are actually available. So one of them is the normal reload if you hit the button. Then there's the hard reload that attempts to ignore the cache and reload from the server, if it can. And then sometimes that fails, believe it or not, and your only option really is to empty the cache completely and then force a hard reload. And a hard reload is equivalent to, or AKA, going back to the server to get the content. So this tells you something that's kind of interesting, that what it's telling you is that your browser, by default, in order to optimize performance for you as the user who tends to get frustrated when it's slow, will prefer to load stuff from your local hard drive if it can, rather than go to the web server and get the latest version. And there is, there's a time period attached to it. I don't know what it is inside the logic of a browser. I've never gotten to look at the source code. But it might be a day, it might be a week, it might be a month. I always tell people this, for as much as we hate Internet Explorer as a browser, right? And even Microsoft is saying, try a different browser when you load it up. One thing that it did have going for it that none of the other browsers had was this setting under General Browsing History Settings, that you could override what the browser does automatically. In all the modern browsers, Chrome, Firefox, Safari, Edge, Opera, keep going, whatever browsers you use, are all set to automatically determine for you what's pulling up on the screen. Whether it's going to the browser cache, whether it's going back to the server, whether it's ignoring what's in the cache and loading from the server, it makes its own decision. Internet Explorer was the only browser where you could go in here and click this, which I always would do for Internet Explorer when it was the king of the hill, because for a web designer it was awesome. When I hit a refresh, I knew it was actually refreshing. But notice, that's not the default. Default is automatic. But on Internet Explorer, you could come in here and force it to reload every visit of the web page every time you hit refresh. Can't do that in any of the other browsers. All right. So as much as you might want to knock Internet Explorer, it did have that feature going for it. And I have no idea why the other browsers don't have some equivalent. But you know what? If you are doing that hard reload thing like I showed you, if you bring up that inspect panel and then you come up here and press and hold, you get all three options. Most people only realize that there's two, even the ones that are in the know. But if you're still having issues, because sometimes I even have issues when I'm reloading web content, I control F5 a few times and go, what the heck? I know I uploaded it. You saw me upload it. There it is. I can see it on the server. Why isn't it coming up? Sometimes you have to clear the cache to make it show. But what I also tell students is, you know what? You can always just shut the browser down for this session and restart it. Sometimes that fixes it. Or just try a different browser and see if it loads. Okay, so don't get frustrated. But here's the interesting thing. Why do they cache content? It's as simple as this. When you're downloading images, that takes bandwidth. When you're downloading a big JavaScript file or CSS template file like Bootstrap and all the stuff that comes with the projects that we're building here, you're sometimes talking megabytes worth of stuff, and if a person's on a phone or on a slow connection, not everybody's got awesome internet. That's just the truth of it. You are inhibiting their performance. And you know what? If they're going to Google again today for the 50th time to Google, do I really need to reload Google's JavaScript libraries again? Because I don't think you guys realize that just pulling up this page here, which seems like it's nothing, if I do a right click, view source, first of all, it's like typically minified like crazy, but look at all these CSS, all these CSS files. I guarantee you any one of these that I click on is going to be at least hundreds of lines long, right? So every time I'm hitting the page, it's got to download all of these. Oh wait, just wait. There's also JavaScript. Okay, how about one of the, I'm just randomly clicking on one. All right, that's a really short one. What about this one? For every single asset that you're downloading it. When you hard reload, it's reloading all that stuff again. How often do you think these files change? Like never, right? That's the thinking. Why would you force them to re-download what they're already using today? All right. So that's the mindset, and all the stuff that are assets on a web page, images, content, external links, CSS, JavaScript, whatever, those all get cached in your browser. Did you know that people that go through and clear their history, right? So let's say my wife doesn't find all the stuff I'm doing, right? It's still there, folks. Did you know that? It doesn't clear your cache. You just cleared your history. It's a difference. Interesting, right? So like all those people at home, I gotta hide from my mom that I was watching Netflix or whatever, you know what? It's still in there. You have to really go in and clear the cache. That's it, and that's kind of a separate process. All right. So what we will do in our application development is we will throw in the capability of caching, which is going to allow us to keep the output version of our page for a certain amount of time before the user can refresh the page and actually get a fresh version. Do you guys remember we kind of did this early on?
Yeah,
A little?
that sounds familiar.
Yeah. So that's basically what we're doing. All right. Now, if you guys aren't noticing just from the code that's here, right, they want us to go back to our simple app thing with the employees. So what we're going to do is let's just go open up that project and take a look at our output cache. I don't know if you guys recall that at all. So I'm going to go ahead and open up the MVC simple app. I want to make sure that it's the one on my local hard drive here. And now, you guys can scold me. What am I not doing?
Version.
Very good. Thank you. At least one of you said it. Yeah, I'm not versioning my work, which is asking for trouble, right? So guess what I'm going to do? Because I've been actually having troubles lately, and I don't think it's necessarily Visual Studio, but it might be. But I have been blue screening a lot, which is very unusual, and I haven't figured out how to fix it yet. So I'm going to go to my D drive, and yes, I'm going to version the simple app. Let's make a copy. Let's paste it back in. Because when does it come to bite you? The one time you don't make the version. That's when it happens. And now that I actually have like versions that are working and I think stable, you know, let's just make sure that we play it safe. All right, so there's our copy, and let's rename that. We'll call it section 16 complete, right? Because section 17 was the security thing, right? So different thing. All right, so let's go back and open it now. And we can just go to recent projects and solutions here and just pull it back up. But see, now I have peace of mind. If I blue screen, which, you know, the way things are going, it might happen, or if I screw something up, I have that ability to go backwards and still recover everything. Just a logical thing to do, folks. All right. So this is from the employee controller, if you remember. So I'm just going to open that up. And what they were doing here is right above the index method, they were going to add this little cache line. And I'm going to put it directly above the method, just like that. And maybe the example, they put it above the comment, or they're just ignoring the comment altogether. All right, so what this is telling us, we put this little directive in, it's just simply saying that whatever the output of this method is, it's going to be cached. Now, this is the important thing, is where is it, you know, where is it going to be cached? Is it cached back on the server?
In the RAM, or I think.
Yeah, you know, I'm going to tell you what, I'd say the jury is out on that. Because, you know, if we're doing this on the server, I think it's the server that's actually controlling when you can get a refreshed copy. And then whatever your browser is doing is a separate issue. Because this is server-side code. This won't execute. C# code's not going to execute in your browser. The code gets compiled and it's running on the server. So it's really, that's being controlled from the server.
Is it cached for, if you have multiple people hitting that page, is it cached for individual people?
Well, yeah, that's really a pretty astute question. So Brenda's question was, if you have multiple people hitting the page, is it cached for separate people? Yes. And that's handled by session state management. So one of the reasons that we're logged in and we're running a server-side application, so even if you're not logged in, there's a session state ID that follows your interaction based on your browser and your IP address. And then it does, yes, it will cache based on individual users. Isn't that interesting?
Is that in IIS?
Boy, that's a good question. No, I think the application, I think the compiled code is doing it. Yeah. All right. So next thing they want us to do is actually test this out. And they want us to do breakpoints in here. So let's actually try that technique. And I don't know how many of you, are there any of you here in class that have never used a breakpoint in an application? Are you guys familiar with what that is? Okay, so everybody, good. I know that, some of us when we teach programming, we don't necessarily hit that really hard, and then some teachers really focus on it quite a bit. But basically a breakpoint is just a way to put a little stop in your application so that you can see when it hits a certain spot. So what I'm looking at right now is on page 154 in the tutorial document, right at the top. We're going to add a breakpoint right to the I guess the code that's inside the index method. So we're not doing it for the whole method. We're just doing it for the code that's inside, the code that actually instantiates the list of employees. Okay, so I'm just looking at screens around the room here. So I have one student saying, is this the breakpoint? No, in fact, if you click that little screwdriver, it's just showing you some of the mechanics here.
Oh, okay.
Right. So they have this code highlighted here, but they want us to add a breakpoint. And in the past, I would just click in the margin here and it would just do it. And I'm just wondering if it's because maybe we're not saved. So, all right. Well, there is also the menu approach to doing it, which is to toggle a breakpoint by hitting F9. So let's just go ahead and do that. Let's just throw that in. Now, the interesting thing is, and here's what I'm questioning right now. Okay. So I was just I was clicking here next to 17 and not in the gray margin because you can just toggle them from the gray margin. I'm not sure why. I guess it depends on which screen you're looking at. On my laptop screen here, I can see the definition between the white and the gray border, whereas if I look up on the computer screen in the classroom here, that's indistinguishable. And I don't know if you guys are having that effect on your monitor. Like, do you see a...
You
can see it. But like over there, like for whatever reason, the one right across from me, I'm not seeing it at all. All right, but so if you got to land in that gray margin, you can toggle a breakpoint. All right, so now what they want you to do is, now that you've got a breakpoint toggled, let's go ahead and run the application and go to the employee page. And one thing that we haven't done yet, when we could do, is we could put in like a redirect or index method for this application so it doesn't go to like an error page every time. Didn't we talk about that last time? And we never did it? I don't think you guys even remember. I don't think you guys even remember that far back, right? That was like, I think it was like a whole 2 weeks ago or something. All right. As it's running, I think what's kind of interesting here is to kind of watch. And notice the breakpoint right now, right? It's not currently being hit in the application. We're still waiting for the application to load. Will it hit that method when it loads up? It won't, because we're not asking it to, right? But now notice how it turned red. You see that? It did. A really long time to load. I wish I could provide some background music for you while you're waiting. Sing a song or something. Play the Jeopardy theme, maybe. Something obnoxious like that. It's like a minute something, a minute and a half in, and the page still hasn't loaded. Guarantee you'd lose all your users if they were really waiting that long. Okay, so finally loaded up. Yes, that's what it's supposed to do. And then we're going to go to employee. And then notice, as I hit that, and I'm going to make this a little bit smaller. If it will actually let me. We have hit the breakpoint, and we know that we've hit it because it's waiting there. It's got the little arrow in the mix now. All right. So do you guys remember what the command is to go to the next step? All right. So you can step into, that would be one thing you could do, or you could actually hit F5 to continue, and that's actually what I'm going to do. So I'm going to hit F5 to continue. And what I'm hoping to do is kind of keep both of these things on screen at the same time, if that's at all possible. Let's see if maybe we go this way with it. So I'll go back to Visual Studio here, and I'm going to hit continue. Remember, this is where we're stuck right now. All right, and it actually pulled up the list. Notice how this week it's maintaining my database, because my database is functional now. So it pulled back all the weird stuff that I typed in last time. All right. All right, so it says refresh the browser again within 60 seconds, and you'll see that the breakpoint is not hit this time. So what they're really trying to demonstrate to you is, and it hasn't been 60 seconds yet, right? Right. So let's hit refresh. Or no, I guess it has been 60 seconds. I've been talking that much. But it has a little thing. Let's continue. All right, now I'm going to hit refresh really fast. Notice no breakpoint this time, right? I didn't talk for a whole minute. Hit it again. All right, now I think I can talk for maybe like 20 or 30 seconds. And then we'll see that it actually refreshes and hits the breakpoint again. The breakpoint is just a way to really tell that the output cache is working, because this time, you know, the first time we played with the cache, I don't know if you guys remember this, many chapters back, we worked with the date time, so when it changed we could see it, right? So here the only thing that we have to show us that we're actually refreshing, see, and it still hasn't hit a minute. What if I do a Control F5? Still. All right, try it again. Has it been a minute, you think? So really the only way to test this now is I'm looking at my recorder clock, and I'm going to wait a solid minute because it doesn't seem to be hitting. I'll pull this back over so you can see that we're actively running. We're at about the 20-second mark now. "30 seconds. "40 seconds. We'll say 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I should be able to refresh. Still not hitting the break. Oh, did the breakpoint get cleared? Look like it got cleared.
I went back to the breakpoint.
Yeah, you know what? I must have accidentally cleared it when I was clicking on it before. All right, so if I really want to test this, I got to wait another minute. And I guess I'll try to be patient and wait one more minute. It's not the end of the world. And I should have known that right away because none of the text was not highlighted red, was it? So all right, I just did a refresh, and it did hit the breakpoint, right? And then you see what's happening here in the background in the browser, how it keeps spinning. But what's interesting too is that, I don't know if you guys have ever caught this with new browsers, but if you are working on offline or online and you lose your connection or you're not connected to Wi-Fi yet or something like that, and you bring up your browser, browsers now automatically will repoll the server and reconnect you. So that's what's happening right now, is it's trying actually to reconnect, but it's realizing that it's hitting that cache point. It's not even letting me refresh. Let's try it refreshing again. I'm not sure if it's been a minute yet, but you know, I haven't been watching the clock this time, but I'm hoping you guys get the point. All right, so let's just say that it's working just fine. I'm going to go ahead and remove the breakpoint at this point. All right, and what they want us to do is like figure out a way to actually see how it's being changed. All right, but in order for that to happen, we actually have to get into creating a different view. So what they're doing at the bottom of page 155 is we're going to go ahead and create a detail page to go with kind of like the missing action on our form. All right, so we need to do a right click on the details action method inside of our code. So let's get Visual Studio kind of back up into full screen mode here. I'm going to close the output window. And let's go ahead and find the details method here, which is right there. Now, notice there are two different versions of the detail method. And actually, I'm going to correct that. Nope, there's not. There's only the one, the get. So I'm just going to come inside here, anywhere inside the code. I'm going to do a right click and add view. All right. The view name is going to be called details. No reason to change it from the default. We want to make sure that we choose the template for details. The reason we're calling it that, right? So we just want to look at the details of a record. The model class that we're using is the one that we created, which is the employee for simple app. And now they do want us to add a context class, which is the DB context. And the reason that we're doing that is because that is declared, and I wish it was on screen right now, but that's declared just above this block of code. We're not worried about any of the check boxes. And notice this is kind of interesting, that if we wanted to create something as a partial view, we could actually do that right here. Isn't that interesting? And now if we did that, it would create it with an underscore at the beginning, and then we could use that as something we can interject into other pages, but we won't do that. Okay, go ahead and click Add. And what it's going to do is it's going to create that view file for us. So over here in Solution Explorer, when it's all done, you'll notice there would a details view. All right. If you want to go ahead and take a look at that detail view which just came up, it follows very much the same patterns that we've seen. And then I also want you to notice here that unlike some of the other forms, unlike edit, right, where it's got validators and it actually has ways to pull the data in, this is simply displaying the data. That's all it's doing, folks. If you wanted to edit this, it does give you an action link at the bottom to trigger the edit mode, but that would take you to the edit view. It wouldn't be done from within that particular interface. All right. At this point, we're scrolling way down to page 159. And on page 159, they actually want us to go ahead and add a couple of things back to the employee controller in order to control the output cache for details. And not only that, but to get the details to actually appear on the page. So there's a couple of different things that need to be added here. The first thing is the output cache. So I'm going to actually grab that snippet of code, and I'm going to put that right here. And then we also need to put some code inside the details area. I'm trying to see if my PDF will let me copy this. It's being a little resistant, frankly. It's like trying to select it as an image as opposed to text. I don't know if you guys get that effect once in a while. But here it is. And this is actually 2 lines. So see, the first line is actually pulling in the database object that we're working with. And then the second line is returning the view relative to the employee. Let's go ahead and save this. If you haven't done that in a while. Let's go ahead and run it and bring up the employee page and see what happens. So now our details link should work. I'm going to come out of full screen. We certainly don't need to be full screen for this app, at least not right now. Alright, we want to bring up our employee list here. Okay. Now we should be able to click on details. Notice how it pulls it up. Not the prettiest thing in the world, but there it is. And then we should be able to also get to the edit window from here takes us to that different view. But if I go back in there, let's go back to details. And now let's talk about the code that we actually added, because we kind of like didn't really do that much. So the code that we added here, which is right in the left-hand window, has a couple different arguments in it. And the first one is duration. And you notice that the duration for that is set to max value. So how would you read that? The output cache is at the max value. What would you suppose the max value might even be for something like this? Who knows, right? But you can probably be assured it's probably more than a minute or two, right? All right, so then what about vary by param equals ID? So in other words, when we pull up the detail view, so here's the catch to this. The second aspect of that is vary by parameter. Which parameter are we varying it by? By ID. So in other words, when we're looking at the output of any particular record, that's individually cached relative to a different record in our database. Why would you want to do that? It's a really good question. Well, how about this? How about very simply, because if I put this up on the screen, I'm using the same details method to pull up all the detail records for any record in my database. But that output screen, so right now I'm looking at Darth Vader, but if I was looking at Luke Skywalker, that would be a different cached entry because it's a different parameter that's being passed. So vary by parameter ID. So if I was looking at a different record, that output for that record is cached separately from this one. Does that make sense? A little more sense?
So it caches both of them, all of them, every time you pull one up?
Right. Well, every time I pull one up, it caches it based upon the ID. So I could pull up I just go through and pull up each record, but each record stays cached for whatever the max allowed is. The funny thing is you can also, and I'm going to pull our screen back over. If you want, you can actually control your cache settings kind of globally, and the way that you do that is by using your web config file. So one thing that you might do is this. Is you might go to that web config file and you might add a caching section inside there, and you can actually put in kind of like what I would consider global settings for all of your output fields. Now, the reason that you might do that is this. It's very simple. If you're building an application and you're finding that you're using the same cache settings to improve performance, and you're just putting it in individually on all the stuff, that's silly. When you could just do it on a global level, and you're using the same setting, and you notice that you can cache it for 10 minutes. That apparently must be the max, I'm guessing. So you got that duration in there. And then vary by parameter, and it's set to none. However, you might actually switch that so that it does match the parameter altogether. So if you want to go ahead and do that, you can go in, add this stuff to the cache, and you guys are noticing that, I feel like I'm obliged to do it, huh? I probably should. I'll just demonstrate it. But we can switch it now to that global level. Let's go ahead and do it just so you guys see how it's done. We'll have to stop the application from running, of course. We'll jump down to web config. All right, and then we'll add that section in. This is split across 2 pages, so I'm being cautious to do it in pieces. Okay, does it matter where I put this inside here? Well, it has to be inside the configuration. Must appear within the system.web section. You guys catching that? So let's go ahead and highlight that so we see it next time. So let's find the system.web section. Do you see system.web? Here. Alright. So let's paste the first part in. Then let's get the closing section. Alright. There's our cache settings. And now whenever we want to apply the cache, we just simply refer to it by name. Let's save and close web config. And then we're going to go back to here. And this is back in our employee controller. And we can run that cache profile directly. Let's see if I can just copy that in. And save it. Let's, of course, test it. So we do have to launch it and test it. But now what that's going to do is it's just going to automatically go to that global setting and use that as opposed to the individual one that we had. Now, whether you think 10 minutes is excessive or not, you know, that seems kind of excessive to me. But it's to demonstrate the point. So that means no matter how many times within a 10-minute time frame I do a refresh, it's not going to show me anything different. What drives those decisions is really kind of relative to your application, the kind of server loads that you have, the kind of stuff that your users are doing on the system. So those are all considerations when you're doing this. This is just to demonstrate to you that it does work. All right, and let's just add employee to the mix here. And then, you know, if you wanted to prove it with a breakpoint again, you could. But I could go in here and keep hitting refresh for 10 minutes to my heart's consent, and guess what I'm going to get? Same thing I already have on my screen. All right. I'm not a huge fan of that change because I think that's a ridiculous setting. So I'm actually going to go back in and comment that out. Or, you know, I could always switch that to cache it for, I could change the name to cache 1 minute, right? And you know what? Why don't we go ahead and do that? Let's change it and just make it 1 minute. And of course, the way that you adjust that, oops, you gotta adjust the name and then switch that to 60 seconds instead of 60 minutes. And then you would also need to make sure your controller is correct, which it seems to be, and then you can try it again and just validate that it works. All right, so that's caching on a global level, folks. All right, that completes section 18. So let's end this video. No, actually, should we just keep going? Let's just keep going. All right, in section 19 we have a little bit of work to do too, and I'm hoping I can finish this before we are done with class today, so that's my anticipation. All right, so I guess I'll bring this back over to the screen, and we'll talk a little bit more about Razor. And Razor is something we've been kind of toying with, but I guess we don't really necessarily have mastery of it yet, and I'll tell you that really when it comes with working with it on a daily basis. But we have seen how the Razor view engine actually works inside of this environment. So the big advantage to working with Razor is the way that we can intermingle the Razor code in with our HTML without too many alterations. And then also being able to leverage those Razor view tools and then combine it with you know, basically setting up a template structure, and then as we read stuff in from our application to generate output, it works very elegantly and quickly. If you guys do a little bit of a comparison between what we were doing in .NET 1 class, where we were working with, like, you know, master pages with content placeholders and then injecting content, This is not that far off from that. However, we have more granular control over the output because things are intermingled. So there is some aspects of it that are directly tied to working with C# and some that are not. The biggest takeaway is that capability of intermingling it with your HTML code without actually having to escape in and out of it. And I think that tends to be the grand goal of how it makes it a little bit easier for you to work with. Let's take a look at this screen here. And I think we looked at something like this at the beginning, where when we would do like old school ASP, and this is an exact example of escaping in and out of old school ASP in C# code. So every time we'd have a statement, we'd have to like terminate it, do our HTML, jump in with our ASP code, escape it, just put a pipe in, go back to it, escape it again, just to put a pipe in. It's just ridiculous. The amount of like escapes in and out, and all it takes is missing one of those, and all of a sudden your code's not working right. If you're a PHP person, you're totally used to that. If you write JSP code, you're totally used to that too. But you know what? For as much as that still works, you can still use this technique, folks. There's no reason you can't. It is so much easier to switch to something like this. And look at how much condensed the code is. We're really doing the same thing. We're just removing all those escapes in and outs, and you just continue with your syntax as normal. It's just on a line-by-line basis, and you can directly intermingle it with your other HTML stuff, which makes it so much better to work with. Yes, you do have to learn the syntax for Razor. Razor is a little bit different. And I'm going to just tell you that the only way you get to be an expert on Razor syntax is to use it constantly. Just bottom line. The other thing that helps you be kind of an expert at it is you're working inside of Visual Studio, where a lot of the tools are generating like at least the core pieces that you need automatically, and rarely will you find yourself actually hand coding any of these in, unless you need something really specific to happen and you research it generally. But one of the keys is you always look for that @ sign in code like this, and that is really what is kind of the indicator that you're moving into Razor mode. Okay, they do want us to create a new project here, so let's go ahead. I'm going to close my simple app here, which is still open in the background. Let's get that out of the way. Let's go ahead and create a new project. And I'm going to move this back over to the other screen. All right, so same .NET web applications that we've been building, C#, Windows, and web. Not the core, but the .NET framework. Go ahead and click Next. We're going to call this one MVC Razor Demo. MVC Razor Demo. That's the folder I'm putting it in. Project and solution in the same directory. Then go ahead and click Create. We're going to work with an empty structure for right now. We are going to put folders and references for MVC. We are going to uncheck HTTPS, and we're not worried about authentication. And once you have those selections made, go ahead and click Create. You see what it's telling me? It's telling me I already have this. All right, well, let's call it MVC Razor Demo 2, since we're being so creative. And I'm not going to have it change that, so I'm just getting all my settings back here. I'm not sure why it's being so darn resistant. Let's go take a look at the folder and see what's going on in the folder. Well, it looks like it created them. All right, so here's what I'm going to do. I just have the suspicion that it's already there. So let's go to that particular folder. Let's open up the first one. All right, well, it didn't. Okay. I'm not sure what it's doing, but I'm going to close my current solutions and do this one more time. But first, let's go let's clean out the folder. I think that might be kind of a logical choice here. All right, let's try it again. And I'm not sure if I'm just making a wrong selection on the screen kind of hastily. You know what? And I'm going to name it a little differently. You guys see what I'm doing? I just don't want it to conflict. Now, if it conflicts now, then I'm clearly doing something wrong. So, doesn't seem to be, right? Okay. All right, just a little slight change here. Now, the book makes a point that, you know, this is a blank application. We have no controllers in there. So they want us to go ahead and add a home controller. So if you do a right click, add controller, they want us to choose empty. They want us to call it home. Now we do have an index view. So right now, if you're following along, we just completed page 167 going on to 168. And they're going to have us right click the index action and choose add view. Do we have a model? Do we have a layout page? No, we don't. So let's just go ahead and click add. This is just to give us something to look at when we launch the application. Right? So here's our page. And this is being done with intent here, right? So we're not working with a bunch of tools that are pre-creating all the Razor for us. We're actually going to kind of do some of that a little bit manually, I suppose. All right. All right, let's go ahead now. Well, and I'm looking at this. Maybe we can take a vote. It says, if you run this, you're going to see a blank page. You know what? I totally believe them. Do I have to actually run it? I'm not going to. I'm just telling you that. I believe that it will give me a blank page. What I want to do now is actually add some code to kind of do some work for us, right? So the first thing that we got going on here is we don't have a layout, right? That's the only Razor directive that's in here. But if you look at the very bottom of page 170, what they want us to do inside this div is to set up a little bit of a loop just to demonstrate how Razor works. So I'm going to manually type this in, and if you guys want to copy paste it, that's fine. We're just setting up a basic for loop with, you know, the typical syntax here. Right, and then when you do a for loop like this, you usually get your curly brackets in there, and then inside here, for every time it loops through, I am going to put in a little Razor directive, like so. So what is this going to do? That's right. Because it's just it's just an int, right? All right. Here, but we can, and if you want to see, I mean, we could just say iteration number, right? That will just print that in plain text, correct? All right. Let's go ahead and save this. Let's go ahead and run it. So when the home page loads up, it is going to iterate through the index method. And I put in a little piece of text in there. You don't have to do that, but it should count out the iterations. This is very exciting to watch as it loads. Remember, folks, as you get impatient watching these things load up, once you have these built on the server and they're loaded up and running, you never have to relaunch them as long as the server is running. And then you can see my output there. It went through and it iterated 12 times based on the current value of index in that for structure. So really kind of a convenient way, I mean, just that simple trick alone is a convenient way to repeat content on the screen and put basically C# code right into your HTML backend code on your application. All right, that, believe it or not, completes this section, so I'm glad I let the recorder run and we finished off another section really quick. Before we move into the next section, I'm going to actually give you guys a little bit of a tip here. So we just completed Unit 8 today. We went through sections 18 and 19. And when you move into Unit 9, we are going to be moving into a couple of areas that are kind of important here. And so we are going to be looking at a little bit back at our other book. So if you guys can take the time to read chapters 10 and 11 in your main textbook, that would be very helpful for these chapters coming up. We are going to be playing with two important technologies, some of which you may have touched before. I really don't know what your experiences are. But the NuGet package manager, so we can learn how to add assets to our project. I think most of you already get that part of it. But we're going to just review that a little bit. And then we're going to start talking about this thing called Web API, which is a major advancement in HTML5, and how we work with that inside of a .NET environment. And then we're going to go over to our tutorial document where we're going to do a couple of different things. So I want you to notice that in the tutorial document we are going to be jumping forward to section 22. That means that section 20 and 21, well, at least section 21 is definitely a lecture-only chapter, and I'm trying to remember if 20 is one of those as well. So I'm going back to my Unit 8 here. Yeah, I think if I'm not mistaken, section 20 is lecture-only, as is section 21. And when I look at section 20 in the document, I'll just pull it back over here if it'll let me. There we go. And I'm trying to look at this. Yeah, well, you know what? We're going to look at that in a lecture format. I think it's just a lot of reference material here for both sections 20 and 21. We've already talked about annotations a little bit anyhow. But just so that you guys are clear on that the next pieces of homework are going to be section 22 in the tutorial document. And then we're also going to be working with Microsoft's Web API tutorial. What I do ask with that one, you can go ahead and get that started if you wish, but I do want to guide you through that and the whys and the hows of why we do it. And it's a very important technology that you should be aware of as you work in this field. All right, that ends this video, and class is done for the night. Yay.